is designed for prominent Africans at home and abroad, in the diaspora, people who are because of the prominence attract kind of full houses such as this. We had a seminar on Africa Day in Zimbabwe, and today we're pleased to welcome back Jonathan Moyo, one of our leading scholars in Zimbabwe, and that's why we brought him here. The other credentials are important, but for us, this fact is a scholar, and the topic that we have chosen is a scholarly one, with the Nationalist project in Zimbabwe. To accompany him in this venture, we have another scholar. I was just saying that he's one of the few that remained true to academia. They've never veered off the trail like Jonathan and myself. Professor Jonathan Moyo holds a Bachelor of Science from the University of Southern California in 1982 and a Master of Public Administration degree in 1986 from the same university. He completed his doctorate, PhD in Public Policy again from the same university in 1988, where he also taught undergraduate students while doing the studies. He also did special programs at the University of San Francisco and at Stanford University in the US. As an educationist and an accomplished scholar, Jonathan Moyo has published articles in refereed journals, contributed numerous articles in the popular press, and has written several books that include Voting for Democracy, The Parts of Administration. We are proud as Southwest to have been those who published him early in the game. And I was also pleased to be on the Academic Promotions Committee when we promoted him to professorship some years ago. I can't remember when. And I was on the Academic Council. The other one, Ports of the National Purse. They are available out there. Buy them because we hope to one day pay for outstanding royalties to Jonathan. In fact, we are planning to reprint this book in particular. The Voting for Democracy should be available too from our staff. Jonathan has held several appointments in various academic and policy capacities, which include a lecturer, University of Zimbabwe, Department of International Studies, Program Officer for the Foundation, Visiting Professor, University of Wits, Visiting Professor, Center for African Studies, California, Spokesman for the Constitutional Commission, Governor of Zimbabwe, we worked together at that time, Minister of State for Communication and Publicity, Government of Zimbabwe, July 2005, Central Committee Member, ZANU, PF, 2000-2004, Member of Parliament for Cholocho, 2005-2008, Member of Parliament for Cholocho North, in 2008-2013. Member of Parliament for Cholocho North in 2015 to the present. Central Committee Member of ZANU PF, 2011 to the present. Minister of Information, Media and Broadcasting Services, Government of Zimbabwe, September 2013 to July 2015. Secretary for Science and Technology, Zimbabwe, ZANU PF, 2014 to the present. Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, Science and Technology Development, 2015 to present. That is a brief biodata for Professor Jonathan Moyo. I'll introduce Lloyd now as well. Lloyd Sachikonya, young man born 1954, educated in Zimbabwe. He went to Ahmadu Bello, one of the prominent universities in Nigeria, where he did his MSc in political science, and he acquired a PhD from Leeds University in the UK. I met Lloyd when he was one of our group of outstanding academics at SEEDS, which we formed in 1982. and I'm just saying that he's one of the few who has remained constant. He's been there since 1983. He's on the board of 5 professional international journals, and he has widely published. There are so many books about we've done a book together with Lloyd, in which Jonathan Moyo has a chapter, the debate on the one-party state. The heady days of academia. So, although Gaetano is not able to hear, she's an assignment that, though I fear maybe she didn't want to interact with her boss like others, where I put a whole name. How can I discuss my bosses? I'm glad Lloyd didn't say the same, and so he's here. So, without much ado, I will ask Jonathan to make his presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mandaza. I'm going to follow your good example and speak while seated, although I was tempted to speak while standing until I reminded myself of my unusual height and thought that would be unwise in these circumstances. Good evening, everyone. Yes. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to share my ideas, views with you on the state of the Nationalist project in Zimbabwe. As I prepared to make my remarks, I note that it is just after 5:45. When I was invited, was told it will be from 5 p.m. I draw your attention to this fact because some of us often run the risk of speaking for too long. But on this occasion, if it appears that I've done so, it will be because we've started late.
It's fine.
Otherwise, it's really a pleasure to be back at SAPES. And as Dr. Mandaza has indicated, when I do so, it is always a homecoming of some sort. Because this has been the place of ideas in our country for the better part of the independence period. And some of us started our careers as young academics here. And I'm grateful that I have today the opportunity, in different circumstances, to come back. And one consideration that makes me quite happy and proud to have this opportunity is because, in the context of the scheme of things these days in our country, SAPES is arguably the only place where ideas are still debated in some objective, dispassionate manner. This because the other platforms in civil society, especially the newspapers, both in the public and private media, have been captured by political interests, and in the process have lost the objectivity that is necessary to debate often contentious public issues. And it is to the credit of SAPES that it continues to provide this platform, and it's something that I appreciate, even though I'm not coming from academia. I'm based elsewhere. When I accepted this invitation, I was fully aware of the many public capacities that I have, as pointed out in the introduction. I'm the Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, Science and Technology Development. I'm also a member of Parliament for Cholocho North, a member of the ZANU-PF Politburo. I'm also a student at the University of Zimbabwe, studying law. So I think it is relevant to ask in which capacity am I speaking. And for the avoidance of doubt, especially because we do have members of the press here, I am speaking as Jonathan Moyo. Well, one reason why I accepted this invitation is that there has been, over the last 2 or so months, quite some chatter in certain political circles that some of us in general, and myself in particular, are unusually quiet when a lot of things are happening. And that quietness has been interpreted in all sorts of ways in the whispering community, to say that I am quiet because I am supposed to be a member of the so-called G40. I'm alleged to be a member, and in some circles I'm alleged to be a founder or co-founder. And the charter is that somehow the so-called G40 has been crushed, defeated, silenced, and that is why I am quiet. So, for some of us, you cannot be busy and concentrate on what you are doing and say less about what is happening, observe, study it without commenting. And if you do those things, then you risk sending a message that whatever is alleged to be your political faction has been silenced. Well, I think this is a very good opportunity to end the silence. Because of the importance of the topic we are debating this evening, and also because of my tendency when I'm participating in such fora, dealing with such topics, to talk too much, but respecting the discipline that the moderator has imposed on us. I am going to try, at least for this part of the interaction, to stick to the time allocated to me, and I have to alert you that I've been given 1.5 hours. To do that and to do justice to the topic, I'll try and be disciplined and keep to my text as much as is reasonably possible. So, with the Nationalist project in Zimbabwe, I propose to deal with this in 3 ways. I will start by briefly defining the Nationalist project, and I will do this by presenting a schematic outline which I will use to identify the key features of the Nationalist project. And then I will give an outline of my reading of the balance of forces currently in the country and how these relate to the Nationalist project as I see it. And then I will make an assessment of the current and emerging balance of forces ahead of the 2018 election against the backdrop of what I consider to be the main features of the Nationalist project. And in my view, there are 7 important features of the Nationalist project. But in general terms, the Nationalist project is a summation of the values, principles, and aspirations of the people of Zimbabwe, going back to the pre-independence period. And these values and aspirations define, in my view, Zimbabwe's permanent interest. Every society has its permanent interest. Those fundamental and enduring issues, in this case, principles, that tie different generations, past, present, and future. Our colleagues in Europe like talking about the European project. Well, we have the Nationalist project. This is what has defined not only our state politics, but also who we are as a people in terms of our values and ideals, how we see ourselves. What is fortunate and helpful in this connection is that our new constitution, in fact, provides a useful starting point of defining and understanding the Nationalist project. And this is done in Section 3 of our Constitution, Paragraph 1, Subparagraph I, which deals with the recognition of and respect for the liberation struggle. I think it is quite significant that 37 years after our independence, we are now looking at this issue with a constitution which in fact recognizes the foundation of the Nationalist project. It's unfortunate that this is not part of the everyday discourse, but yet it is a fundamental defining feature of our republic, because Section 3 of the Constitution deals with Zimbabwe's founding values and principles. And a key founding value and principle of our republic is recognition of and respect for the liberation struggle. That sums up the basis of the 7 key features of the Nationalist project, which I am going to share with you. What I want to underscore at this point is the fact that the Nationalist project is historically and constitutionally the fulfillment and materialization of the values and the ideals of the people of Zimbabwe, which in policy terms are their aspirations. And these aspirations, as I've indicated, are enduring, permanent aspirations. Each generation makes its mark, defines, situates itself in relation to those aspirations. In ideological terms, these aspirations are national questions. These 7 features of the Nationalist project are national questions. Questions that every political player, whether state, civil, or market, should engage in one way or another. Now, I'm going to quickly sort of expose these, outline them, and with a view just to indicate why each one is important, and I'm sure that should give rise to a discussion and debate if there are matters arising therefrom. Now, the first and most fundamental people's aspiration or a key feature of the Nationalist project is national unity, the question of national unity, the unity of the people of Zimbabwe. This is an aspiration that was important during the liberation struggle, bringing the liberation forces together, and after independence. And I should mention that we do have also an advantage to look at this question now, because our new constitution has given expression to this aspiration by declaring that Zimbabwe is to be a unitary state, democratic and sovereign republic, which in nationalist terms is a developmental state. The question of national unity is very important because it is about cultivating among Zimbabweans a sense of common belonging, that we have a shared heritage and a common destiny as the people of Zimbabwe. This is very important because, as I said, these features are permanent, they are enduring. It remains to be asked whether 37 years after independence we have succeeded in developing a common, or an understanding of a common heritage and a common sense of belonging as Zimbabweans. We've had quite a number of experiences which have challenged this notion. It can be argued that one of the weaknesses of our state politics is that, in fact, Zimbabweans don't express themselves, especially those who have organized their concerns into political action, either as political parties or civil society organizations and so forth. You find that some people are talking about the new Zimbabwe and some refusing to find their own values and concerns within a common platform. What I think is very important about this is that we need to find a lasting model or system for consolidating the people's power. People's power is consolidated through a kind of a shared existence, or one that produces a common purpose. Second is the economic question about the wealth of the nation. I think as far as this question is concerned, most people will agree that the state exists to create an enabling environment for the creation of the wealth of the nation. It is not by accident that Adam Smith's seminal work is The Wealth of the Nation, the wealth of nations. And we have to ask that question in relation to our own country. And what is important from the standpoint of the Nationalist project is that the wealth of the nation is defined by the land and the natural resources on the land and under the land. That's the basis of the wealth of our nation in material terms. Otherwise, the person and the individual, the people, become the critical parts of that relationship. And what is significant is the fact that our land and our natural resources were stolen, if you want, but certainly dispossessed from our indigenous ancestors, and that the dispossession agenda has been a continuous process of dispossessing the people of the resources, even within the context of our independence. We continue to lose our resources, especially those that are under the land, and even some that are on the land. Now, the nationalist mantra that land is the economy and the economy is land is a fundamental and perennial aspiration of the people in relation to this question, the economic question. And from where I sit, quite a lot has been done to address this question, although still a lot more remains to be done. Just to give you an indication that is very important in my view, and one which also indicates the kind of grounded politics that we have, 1.8 million households in this country depend on land. Their food security depends on land. And this 1.8 million people, it's like about 9 million people. Often, when I talk to our colleagues in the other parties, that we are difficult to dislodge and encourage them to believe the Afrobarometer type of surveys. They say, no, you look, how can anyone support you given this kind of state of the economy and so forth? And we tell them it's because we are actually organically linked with these 1.8 million households. These are the ones we work with. Just this season, we gave, through the presidential input scheme, support to 1.6 million. 1.6 million households. And we relate to them every day. We don't have to hashtag them. We don't have to telephone them. We interact with them and say, here is your 20 kgs of input. How are you doing? In a season like this one, when the heavens open, the connections become real with these people. But what is important to emphasize in this regard is the fact that the historic land reform that speaks to this economic question in terms of an enduring permanent interest has now been enshrined under Chapter 16 of the new Constitution. This is the implications are really, really far-reaching. The implications of the fact that that exercise that some people wanted to dismiss as Hondo Eminda and this and that is now in the Constitution and protected. So a key feature of the Nationalist project has found constitutional expression. And in terms of this economic question, it's only one piece that is remaining, and that is the indigenization piece. Then the third one is the equality question, which was a key grievance of the nationalist movement in general, but especially for race, gender, and even age groups, the youth. It is also notable, and as you will see, from a nationalist project, we take full claim of some of the fundamental Bill of Rights issues that are now in our new constitution, which are directly a result of the nationalist project, which were key grievances of the independence movement, and now have found not just protection but permanence in our constitution. So those issues that are in section 56 of the new constitution, which says all persons are equal before the law and have the right to equal protection and benefit of the law, speak to a fundamental pillar of the nationalist project. And the equality provision is quite revolutionary. The implications will become clear in the fullness of time. And I want to remind you that I'm talking about permanent values. I'm talking about permanent aspirations, which we can locate in the liberation struggle. What the liberation struggle was fought for, the values and ideals of the liberation struggle. Fourth is the democracy question, which is based on the principle that those who govern must have the consent of those whom they govern. Central to this question is the issue about the means for getting into power or for getting power. A very big problem that we see in our country, have seen in other countries that were a product of the liberation movement, have to do with this question, the democracy question. There are some in our country who think that democracy became a major state issue in 2000, and who think that they are fighting a new liberation war because they are talking about democracy and so forth. But this is not historically correct, because the liberation struggle was a struggle for democracy. It was about democracy. Those who participated in it or who are now reading about it will be familiar or will encounter the term NIBMA. NIBMA. No independence before majority rule. This was a clarion call of the nationalist movement. And in essence, this demand, the NIBMA demand, was about the right to vote, which is now for the first time since independence. It's now enshrined under section 67(3) of our constitution. For the first time, it was not in the Lancaster constitution. And I can see some people now think they can use it and pursue some class action, this and that. But of course, it's a right to vote that is justiciable, but in relation to other rights that are in the constitution. This is a major achievement of the nationalist project. This is a foundation, a pillar of that project. Fifth is the question of order and stability. The nationalist project in Zimbabwe has not escaped the post-colonial challenge of order and stability arising from a range of sources, including destabilization by our erstwhile colonizers, but also from ethnic strife and other political divisions. Zimbabwe went through ethnic strife in the first 7 years of its independence, or during the Guguraundi period. This was resolved under the Unity Accord, whose values and ideals are today under threat in very serious ways, and with quite a lot of implications on the Nationalist project in terms of what needs to be done to certainly avoid divisions, strife, but maintain order and stability, which is a major feature of our country, especially since 1987. There are people who want to engage in this debate as to whether we're a fragile state or not, but fragile states are not stable. They don't have order. One country that has stood out, certainly in this part of the world, in terms of order and stability, is Zimbabwe. Now, sixth is the question of sovereignty. Our friends at ZBC like saying that this is sovereignty, but it is sovereignty. And this is about Zimbabwe's right to make its own domestic and foreign policies in accordance with its obligations, responsibilities, and the discharge of the power of the people. So sovereignty, the independence, the self-determination of our republic is in fact the glue of the Nationalist project, the exercise of sovereignty. It is amazing to me that we have people who actually have problems with this, and yet they want to be part of the state. They want to be part of the decision-making class of the state. Well, what is fundamental in the making of decisions of the state, whether it's about domestic policy or foreign policy, is sovereignty. This is about putting Zimbabwe first. Sovereignty is not for the individuals, it's for the state, it's for all of us. So it's not only Donald Trump putting his country first, it's us as well. Then the last one, the last important feature is the skills question. A lot of people realize that our nationalist leadership at independence, and on this one, my brother here, Ibo, had a lot to do with it, put quite some effort and resources in first finding out what skills our country had at independence, and then what skills were needed to build and develop our country. We had a manpower survey in 1982. And as a result, we have one of the best systems of education, certainly in this part of the world, but in fact internationally. We in higher education are proud of the fact that the 252 model of developing and training teachers in our country, which is responsible, one of the major reasons why we've maintained, in fact developed since independence and maintained, and I know that some people think this is being challenged now, a very high literacy rate, is because of that model, and is being copied by other countries, including in Europe. This is a skills question. The development, investing in developing skills through higher and tertiary education. For the better part of our independence period, we focused on the tertiary side of things, And this is why we've produced the best artisans you can find in this part of the world. And now we are consolidating that achievement by focusing on building high-end skills at universities. Without skills, a country cannot develop. The difference between the capabilities of countries has to do with the competencies of those countries. And those competencies are a factor of skills. And this is a permanent issue. It will not change, and it's one that needs to be given priority. Now, given the foregoing, what are the current balance of political forces, and how do they relate to these features of the nationalist project? Broadly speaking, there are currently three notable political forces at play in Zimbabwe. Within ZANU-PF, there are the following two. And just to warn people, I'm going to use defining terms that make sense to me. So, there are two within ZANU-PF. The first is successionists, who are a minority in the ruling party, but who are very vocal and now openly say they are backing the Vice President Mnangagwa to succeed President Mugabe, and they would like to see this happening before the next harmonized elections, and they see the Vice President as the party's presidential candidate in 2018. Now, this is a reality. Everybody is writing about it, everybody is talking about it, but most people, and certainly in the ruling party, do so through whispers. They are not, they are not openly talking about what is in fact openly happening. And I don't know what that is in political science, the inability to discuss what is in front of you. Then there is another force which I have described or called the loyalist. And when I first did this, people thought that I was defining myself as a loyalist. Well, this is the poverty of public discourse in Zimbabwe. You know, that when you use a term and it's a very good term, your detractors start getting worried and say, but you are not a loyalist yourself. And they remind you of your history and so forth. Well, I mean, we go to school, study political science in order to get tools for analyzing what's before us, the public, what it means, to inform others, to engage with others, not to describe ourselves. Now, the loyalists, in my view, are the silent majority in the party who support President Mugabe to serve his full term and to be the party's candidate in the forthcoming elections in accordance with the party's constitution. Now, for the sake of a complete perspective, I should note that outside ZANU-PF, there is, of course, some significant political activity going on in the opposition ranks, and they seem to be preoccupied with building a coalition of the weak, in the hope of getting a chance, however slim as it appears now, of winning the next election. This is very important. The opposition seems to be concerned that it has not succeeded to win an election for the presidency in particular. And there are all sorts of reasons they give. But whatever those reasons, their conclusion is that the best chance for them to win is by coming together. This is them who are saying this. We can see through their action. But the result is they've not produced anything. One day it looks like it's, yes, they've succeeded. The next day, no, they don't know how to do this. But they've signaled that this is the most important thing for them to do. And so we are all watching. And they are likely to spend all the time until the nomination court sits trying to build that coalition. But it is about election. It's very different from the ZANU-PF situation where it is about political power. It is about the real business of the state, which is political power. So in this schematic outline I'm sharing with you for just purposes of discussion, I'm excluding the opposition ranks. And I'm doing so because I'm persuaded by the various narratives out there, including surveys, which indicate that the opposition is not going to do well in 2018. If you want, during the discussion, I can actually read you narratives from prominent leaders of the opposition, like Tendai Biti, for example, saying the game is over, this is for ZANU-PF. Let's see what will come maybe in 2023. But suffice it to observe that the major weakness of opposition politics in Zimbabwe, in my view, is that they are not rooted, framed, I spoke of the opposition and I almost lost my voice. They are not rooted, framed, or cast in the nationalist project. They are not from that tradition. In fact, they do a lot to distance themselves from the nationalist project, to come up with notions of a new Zimbabwe, a different Zimbabwe, which is not rooted in the nationalist project. In my view, that is a fatal weakness because the majority of Zimbabweans are historically, culturally, traditionally, sociologically, spiritually, politically, and indeed existentially rooted in the nationalist project. They are a project, they are a product of that project. That's how we have become Zimbabwe, and we have become Zimbabweans. I therefore think that the state of paralysis that seems to be gripping the opposition means that the question whether Zimbabwe's nationalist project is best examined and answered only with reference to the balance of political forces in ZANU-PF. I don't think there's any rational person in Zimbabwe who's now not aware that if you do that, if you take that position, you then must now come to terms with the so-called Lacoste or Team Lacoste, which is presenting itself in general and its presumed candidate in particular, and that is the Vice President Mnangagwa, is sure in. If you read things, talk to people, look at their behavior, the message is the balance of forces have shifted. And that, what we are going to see going forward, is the assumption of power by Team Lacoste. And if you go to the braais, where they have their braai, because these are masters of whispers, you find them really quite excited. Tapinda, tapinda. is the new song, and the refrain when you start developing an interest with tapinda, tapinda. What are they talking about? Then they say mdara chauya. So well, the whisper from this earlier in the year is especially in this year, but this was the case the last 2 years as well, was that something was going to happen in April. if you were listening to the whispers. What was going to happen, or what that something was, of course, remained a mystery. But in March, something started happening. The heat was turned on the ZANU-PF National Commissar, Comrade Xavier Kasukuwere, who faced dubious votes of no confidence under the absurd claims that he had set up parallel structures to topple the president. But this was real, and it was pushed with vigor and with seriousness that caused certainly observers and even members of the party to believe that something was happening, and that this is going to trigger that something. This was the trigger point. It was supposed to happen in a matter of days, but it became prolonged. It took 8 weeks, 2 months, and as it developed, it assumed what the whisper started saying or describing as the momentum. In fact, as we sit here, we're somewhere along the momentum, the build-up, the surge. And the question is, towards what? Because a momentum, a build-up, or a surge must lead to something. And this question, towards what, is one to interrogate. But in any event, it is important to assess the so-called Team Lacoste and its candidate against the 7 features of the Nationalist project outlined in this discussion. This we cannot afford not to do. Because it's in front of you. So you must ask the question, this thing in front of me, how does it measure up against these 7 features of the Nationalist project? It's very important for those of us, certainly, who are in the broad movement, not only just members of ZANU-PF, but others, such as my brothers seated on my right. So, on the national question, it is a matter of public record that the so-called Team Lacoste defines power as chinu chedu. Because the team and its leader, in my assessment, have no sense or regard for the importance of collective belonging, or having a view of national unity, which is inclusive, which is fundamental to the Nationalist project. Was fundamental before independence, remains fundamental today. But if people start saying, no, ndeche luich, it's ours. Who are you? You were not there. Well, how can the people who were born in 1980 and are 37 years old now, how could they have been there? But they are 37 years. And that means collectively as a group, they are 3 years away from qualifying to run for the presidency. But the age of majority is 18, and they can contest for any office other than the presidency. So when people start having the kind of politics which excludes others on the basis that they were not there, when in fact they physically could not have been there, and then you construct a political narrative on that basis, you create a problem, and that is antithesis to the Nationalist project. That's not what the Nationalist project was. On the economic question, it is again now in the public domain that the so-called Team Lacoste is about command economics, command politics, command ideology, and command everything. I think there was something very important to be said about command agriculture, which is meaningful, because it was intended as a maize import substitution program. But the extension of that logic to everything, to framing everything, even before we have taken stock of the command agriculture or the maize import substitution program, is amazing. and in my view, misplaced. This command framing business is as revealing as it is dangerous, but it is contrary to the values and logic of the Nationalist project, because it sought to empower the people. It sought to empower the communities, not to command them, but to free their spirit, to unleash their energies so that they can contribute to the building of an independent Zimbabwe. Then on the equality question, and again based on what is in the public domain, it is clear that Tim Lacoste and his leader are far removed from the Nationalist project. Instead of espousing the fundamental nationalist value, which is now enshrined in Section 56 of the Constitution, that all persons are equal before the law and have the right to equal protection and benefit of the law, this team has declared itself to be Zimbabwe's stockholders. Not even stakeholders, but stockholders. Under a template of entitlement that is not only against the aspirations of the Nationalist project, but also unconstitutional. It's not good politics to frame yourself in a patently unconstitutional manner. To say, listen, I'm the stockholder and you are not, so listen to me. Well, how do you deal with Section 56 of the Constitution, which says everybody has a right to equal protection and benefit, equal protection of the law and benefit? Because you've always said, no, it was the one by, but now it's us first. Well, the Nationalist project says Zimbabwe first, and therefore Zimbabweans. So people you should even be afraid, and if you don't fear anyone, you should be ashamed to take the position that I am a stockholder and you are not. It's bad politics. On the democracy question, and again based on the information now in the public domain, the so-called Tim Lacoste has used its entitlement ideology to misinterpret the appointment of its leader as vice president to mean his anointment for the presidency, and which presidency should be handed over to him as a matter of entitlement outside an election. To say, they say in their whisper things, and they are now all over the social media with this, pass the baton. And they're saying this to the president. Pass the baton. What baton is this? It's not a relay. It's a democracy. It's a constitutional democracy. And it is a constitutional democracy. And this comes not because of anyone who is wise out there, and certainly not because of me. It's in our constitution. The constitutional democracy is in the Constitution of Zimbabwe, and no one should claim proprietary rights over that. That's a constitution of all Zimbabweans, the people of Zimbabwe. I know there are some political parties which want to create the impression like, we are not a constitutional democracy. Well, the Nationalist project and things of this nature about values are enduring issues. They are permanent. Every generation will face these issues. The answers given will differ. Then, on the question of the order and stability, it is notable that the political positions taken by the so-called Tim Lacoste run against the grain, to borrow a phrase, from of the Nationalist project, largely because they are divisive. An example of this is the current campaign against the Peace and National Reconciliation Bill that Vice President Mpoko is spearheading in Parliament. But of greater concern to me about the threat to order and stability posed by the so-called Tim Lacoste are the issues contained in a document dubbed Blue Ocean that started circulating in 2015, and in an interview that Vice President Mnangagwa gave to an elite British magazine, The New Statesman, last year, entitled The Last Days of Robert Mugabe. These two documents tell a very sad story about a sinister program of capturing state institutions and targeting individuals for extrajudicial attacks in ways that betray the nationalist project, inasmuch as they threaten order and stability in the country. On the sovereign question, Tim Lacoste is working harder to win the support and endorsement of foreigners than to win the hearts and minds of Zimbabweans. So we hear very loud whispers within successionist circles that Zimbabwe needs British support, and that Britain is going to be very significant in the so-called transition, and that such schemes as the Lima Debt Initiative are to assist that process, and that Zimbabwe needs a Deng. He's Chinese, not a Zimbabwean, or a Kagame. They say, oh, Zimbabwe needs a Kagame, a strong man like Kagame. Well, maybe Tim Lacoste needs a person like Kagame. But the Zimbabweans don't. Zimbabweans, no, how about saying they need somebody like a Mugabe, a Joshua Nkomo, a Simon Muzenda, or a Herbert Chitepo? Why do we need a Kagame? Why do we need a strong man? Why don't we get a leader who is produced by the people through the democratic process? And finally, on the skills question, the so-called Tim Lacoste has shown a surprising hostility to the youth, who are not only the vanguard of the party today, but who are also the critical pool from which the skills necessary to industrialize and develop and modernize Zimbabwe must emerge or trained and deployed. There is now an instinctive hatred of the youth. Havana Gwara. They are disconnected from the past. They don't know who the stockholders are. They don't respect the stockholders. But meanwhile, there is clear and present evidence that they respect the leader of the party and the leader of the country. Tomorrow we have a program in Nationalist West of the youth interface with the president, because they support the president. So where does this thing, that Havana Gwara, come from? Now, in my analysis, the so-called Tim Lacoste pose a clear and present threat to the nationalist project. The threat is dangerous, not least because it comes at a time not only when the centerpieces of the nationalist project, as I've indicated, have found expression in our new constitution, but also on the eve of the 2018 elections. It is important that the 2018 elections are used to consolidate the gains and the legacy of the nationalist project, those 7 enduring values. Now, to conclude this presentation, going forward, what are the issues arising from this discussion? For me, I think there are 5 issues that arise from this, and I want to share them with you to conclude my intervention. First, I think the time has come for the silent majority in the nationalist movement to stand up and be counted in defense of the nationalist project. I think that it's not right for people to be quiet when there are things in front of them, when they can see what is happening, when they actually talk about it in their bedrooms, when they talk about it kwamereki and everywhere, except where it matters most. I think if it is true that there is a momentum and something is about to happen, let's talk about it. Let's ask questions. Let's unpack it. Certainly those who are in the majority who support the president and support the nationalist project, silence must not be an option to them. Doesn't make sense. Because if you keep quiet, you will wake up tomorrow into something. And you will regret your silence. Second, the current situation where the so-called Lacoste team uses a whisper campaign to carry out a silent power grab is harmful. It is harmful to the values and aspirations of the Nationalist project, and it is harmful to our new constitution. People who say they are on the verge of taking power deserve scrutiny. If you promise us that you are taking power, and you say join or you will be left behind, then you must be subjected to scrutiny. Third, there are a lot of things that have happened in a number of key national or state institutions that not only smack of a capture of these institutions by the so-called Team Lacoste, but which things are detailed in the Blue Ocean document and the very revealing British magazine, The New Statesman. This is a fundamental point. And this point, in my view, challenges academia. It's unbelievable that we live in a society where a document comes out called Blue Ocean. And then, a year later, a very influential opinion making magazine for the British elite, The New Statesman, conducts a seminal interview with a vice president, where things are detailed in these documents, not only about what should go on, what should happen, but what has already happened, and which things raise eyebrows in any other normal environment. But the academics are just enjoying themselves. They're not analyzing the implications of these things. But key state institutions involved, public media, and judicial institutions. It's not right to expect politicians to debate these issues. And for some of them to debate from a point of view of ignorance. For a society that prides itself as a highly educated society, I think our academic community is letting our society down. And I'm not speaking as the Minister of Higher Education, although I should. But I'm speaking as a citizen to say, but why are we reading comments from academics in Newsday? Is that your platform? And when the academics make comments on Newsday, the comments are not different from mine. Because we would like to get examined. Now, we have evidence. There are two documents. If people want to understand, and this is the debate here, if you want to understand what's going on, read Blue Ocean document and the New Statesman interview that came out in December, where the Vice President is interviewed. Where things, especially in the British magazine, the New Statesman, they are stated as a matter of fact. And they have been in the public domain for over half a year without anyone publicly denying the contents thereof. That means what is in there is true. So why are we quiet? But the contents, which no one should ask me what is it, what are the contents? Go and read for yourself. I've told you the source. But very concerning. I think it's important to unpack, to revisit those documents, unpack them, analyze them, and where necessary, let's see legal action being taken, because some of the issues have legal implications. Fourth, the time has come to expose and dispense with the myth entertained not only by the so-called Team Lacoste, but also by others, including some in countries like Britain, that Vice President Mnangagwa is the designated successor, or that he is the successor, only successor, on the verge of taking over any time now. The position is that there is no vacancy. This is the position in our party. There is no vacancy in the office of the president, in the party or in the government. And where there is no vacancy, any talk or activity of succession, such as contained in the Blue Ocean document and in the New Statesman interview, is by definition subversive. Fifth, and finally, this is the last point, the notion peddled by the so-called Timla Coste that its leader is the only one who is above or senior to everyone else below President Mugabe is false. I don't know why we have not told them that Murugunyepa. But they've been whispering, and other people being silent, living. But it is false. And that falsehood should now be engaged and stated. There are others that are senior to the leader of the so-called Team Lacoste in the party. One of them, and I give this by way of an example, but an important example in my view, is Dr. Sidney Sekramai. He is senior. This example is an interesting one because, Dr. Sekramai's loyalty to the president, President Mugabe, to the party, to the country, is beyond question. And so are his liberation credentials, beyond question. So is his political experience, beyond question. So is his consensus style of leadership. Quite engaging. So is his stature unquestionable. So is his commitment to the Nationalist project. And above all, in my estimation, his humility. His humility. He's not arrogant. He doesn't say, "Ndezwe or Chinche. He's accommodating. He's a true nationalist in the vein we have seen them from the tradition of President Mugabe, the late Vice President Nkomo, the late Vice President Simon Muzenda, the late Vice President Musika, the late Vice President John Nkomo. You don't say Agava Negupi. You can tell Agava Negupi through the engagement. Grounded. And I'm giving this as an example, remember. I'm challenging the notion that below the president there's only one leader who is senior. I'm saying that's not true. And I'm challenging the historians to dig up the evidence if they think I'm not telling the truth. What is true is that because of his humility, Dr. Sekramai's story is not well known. But once you get to know it, encounter it, it's infectious. But so that you don't misunderstand me, there are others. Even Vice President Mpoko is actually senior. But you won't know if you live in a society that doesn't value information, which is driven by propaganda. But he is. Check the record. Anyway, so with the Zimbabwe's nationalist project, well, it is facing formidable threats, but it has also excellent opportunities on the ground. As we move towards 2018, I expect to see the balance of forces radically shifting towards and in favor of the nationalist project. I thank you.
Thanks, brother. We want to try and summarize leave it to the discussant to lead us into the discussion. Lloyd?
You'll agree with me, Chair, that it's a very tall order after that very comprehensive overview of the Nationalist project. I think Professor Moyo has done justice to the definition and elaboration of the concept. In fact, I think he has been quite scholarly, particularly in the first part of the lecture, when he was defining the key pillars or key features of the project. The second half of the presentation, of course, was a critique of his sparring partners within the party. Parties, nationalist parties, are broad churches. These movements are broad churches, and you have various strains, so mini movements within that particular movement. But I just wanted to maybe make a couple of observations, 3 or 4. I know that many of you are burning to intervene in response to Prof. Moyo's presentation. I think one can say that the Nationalist project can be inclusive and broad, but it can also be narrow and partisan. It can be a polarizing project or a unifying project. It can also be, I think, be determined or influenced by whether there exists a broad social contract within a particular society, or whether, in fact, that society experiences what is sometimes we call coercive authoritarianism, or a kind of a winner-takes-all approach in the way in which that society manages its politics and development. And above all, I think the various features of a nationalist project are partly determined by the level of legitimacy that it has in a particular society. Issues of accountability and transparency of that project, and in fact the mode of the electoral or leadership systems and orientation in that particular society. But I think to come back specifically to Prof. Moyo's presentation, you almost got the sense that the Nationalists project started with the liberation struggle. I'm sure he did not want to give that impression. I think we all know that this is a project that goes back 60 years, if not even 70 years. Those various movements that provided the foundation in the 50s, the various parties, the precursors to the parties that did emerge in the 1960s and later on. And you almost got the sense that the project can be reduced to a particular party, particular parties, when he was talking about the opposition movement. And yet, that opposition movement, one can argue, is also part of this project. If we define it in an inclusive and broad manner, if we define the Nationalist project following Prof. Moyo, using the Constitution, the various principles and national values in that Constitution, I think these values, various provisions in our Constitution, were the product of some kind of consensus between the ruling party and the opposition parties in this country. So, in other words, the Constitution that we have is the product of a consensus reached after protracted discussions in the wider society. In fact, it was very protracted because the process began in 1999 and was only concluded in 2013. But just to pick up, in the last remaining minutes that I have, just to notice, just to make the point that Prof. Moyo has been very, I think, consistent about what he terms the need to look at the dialectics between national unity and democracy. And his chapter in this book certainly does do that. But I just want to quote, and I think that complements your presentation, Prof. Moyo, when you refer to, when you say that, and I'm not quoting you out of context because it's from the chapter itself here, where you say democracy is a much more important human ideal to strive for than national unity. The latter is not a human ideal. It is a matter of political expedience in the struggle for political power. But lest you say, maybe I've plucked it out of context, you also make the observation that the substantive meaning of national unity within the context of the liberation struggle in Zimbabwe should be seen against the background of the quest for democracy. And finally, you say national unity must be a dialectical result of competing parties under common broad-based democratic constitutional rules. And it was important that you define the democracy question as part of the nationalist project. But perhaps you could expand it a bit more about the economic question, because I think the crisis we're going through now, and the crisis that we went through during the 2000s, is fairly serious. If we look at the pace of our development since independence, I don't think we have ever developed, our economy has grown consecutively at more than 5% for more than 2 years or 3 years. We've been slow growers, and certainly I think there is a structural problem there. And I think it also relates to marginalization of certain communities, certain regions in the country. And I think there is a huge challenge there, and perhaps not enough has been done around that. I think these are some of the issues I think that we can pursue in our discussion. I would not like to intervene in your critique of what you call Team Lacoste. I'm sure there are many here who can vote for them in the debate. Thank you.
The very profound points you've raised. I'm going to ask Professor Jonathan Moyo to respond to Lloyd as a way of, you don't want to. Well, then I have one broad question really about the Nationalist project. Whether it is not evident that there is a major, whether it's not locked up in a historical bind. If you take it from the point of view of the experience of post-colonial Africa as a whole, in their apparent failure to transcend the first stage of the objective of the national, which is independence. It appears to me the Nationalist project it brings about independence and gets stuck there. It's unable to move on the economic front, the point you made. Because it's prescribed or proscribed or constrained by ideological limitations. It's unable to look beyond. The famous saying by Nkrumah, seek ye first the political kingdom, and all else will follow, has clearly failed. It has not followed. Is this a major flaw, a fatal flaw, the Nationalist project? Isn't there a need, therefore, taking up from what you talked about the youth, to redefine the Nationalist project, to enhance it? That's mine for you to consider.
I think I should acknowledge.
Yeah.
I think it's fair and right for me to acknowledge the very useful intervention by my brother, Professor Sachikone. He is correct. And in fact, I should also thank you for doing what I experience in most interactions, which is to remind me of what I wrote. And in my view, as you said, there is in fact no contradiction between that and the essence of my thinking right now, except to say my current interest is a very practical one. You know about practical politics. I did not say, and I don't believe, that there is a normative model of the Nationalist project that we should be following. I said the Nationalist project defines who we are as, broadly speaking, Africans, but in particular Zimbabweans, who have a background of the liberation struggle, which struggle had values and ideals, and which values and ideals defined the Nationalist project. And I did not and do not see it as a post-independence phenomenon. I see it as grounded in our liberation struggle. And our liberation struggle starts with the early nationalism, but even that early nationalism must contend with the first Chimurenga, when we begin as a people to react to colonialism. I see every generation having a responsibility of defining, but always guided by these values. I can understand a critique that says it seems to have stopped in 1980. But there is evidence that a number of things that have happened since 1980, notably the land reform program, addresses a fundamental value or an ideal of the nationalist movement. And yes, I agree with Professor Sachikone that the constitution, which is... Sorry?
Say Lloyd.
You don't want to? You worked for your professorship. The Constitution was a consensus. It's true. But I'm arguing, and I'm entitled to this argument, that it's instructive to note that the fundamental ideals of the nationalist project have found expression in the new constitution. And this is important, and I'm inviting some discourse, some research, some work on that. Because what has happened over the years or in recent years is that those who are seen to be part of the nationalist movement in the world of practical politics, ZANU-PF, run away from the ideals or have forgotten what the ideals. A lot of other intervening factors have happened. But yet, this is what really defines us. And one would expect that there are political parties that develop because they think one or more of these values have not been fulfilled, or they want to give content and meaning to them. And I think that is okay. But I just wanted to acknowledge the contribution as informing and very useful.
Thank you. Vincent, Sarah?
Thanks, if you don't mind. People will hear me. Thanks, it's going to be a bit of a quick comment.
Maybe stand up, they can see you.
With the dialogue on the issues you raise. I think fundamentally you will be surprised that we want the same things for this country. There is no differing aspirations with regard to achieving the nationalist objective, particularly as the younger generation who grew up with huge expectations of the Zimbabwe we thought would grow up in, and the Zimbabwe we thought would live in. The most dangerous assumption you can make, personally, maybe it's convenient, is to assume that we don't want the same. Right. But the second and most important issue is the how. You dwelt on the what. And I was expecting us to maybe spend more time on the how. Because our problem, for example, my personal, speaking as Vince Musewe here, is the seemingly obvious failure of the achievement of the very objectives that you are talking about. And that is where the problem is. It's not about the what. It's really about the how and the who. And until we resolve that, particularly as a means of progress for a country, we will continue to have this disconnect between what those who are in power might think those who are out of power want, without actually appreciating that there is no question about sovereignty, as you mentioned. There's no questions about unity. Actually, I would call it inclusiveness. There is no question about the issue of economic development and social inclusiveness. There is no question about that. The issue, even to this date, is the how and the who. And this is where some of us are beginning to intervene, to say, no, we think it can be done better like this, like that, and like this. And that is where I would find more, more interest in actually having a deeper conversation.
Thanks, Vincent. Is that hand there? A microphone here? Just. Yes, yeah. Zamchia.
Yes.
Not in Dao, please, English.
I thought the Constitution recognizes Dao. So maybe the cultural issues are also part of the nationalist. Well, I just want to say thank you for the presentation. Of course, part of it was for your own personal practical experience, understandably so. But the import and the value out of it is how you managed to bring to me the issue of stability and democracy as both important values. Because I think one of the narratives now is that we need maybe a successor who can be able to bring stability. And the discourse is, being held in such a way that You can have stability, you have to choose between stability and democracy. Yet you can have both stability and democracy. I'm sure the citizens of Zimbabwe will need both stability and democracy. That is my comment. And thank you very much for your elaboration on Dr. Sidon Sekerama. It really helps us to see things in a different way.
Microphone at the back there, please. Identify yourself, please.
Well, I'm Craig. Thank you for the presentation. But I think I really have issues, particularly the part of you then reducing the Nationalist project to start with into the dichotomy of the ZANU-PF factions, which I think really becomes polarizing even within ZANU-PF itself. Because the ZANU-PF members, I believe, one is a part of the loyalists, as you want to put them, or G-vote, as we call it, outside that. And the successionist or the Timla course, as you want to put it. So I think really within ZANU-PF itself, there's a large group of people who are not even involved in those things, who see things differently. But for me, more importantly, and which I thought you were going to touch on, is that the Nationalist project in itself, is it a true expression of the fundamental, addressing the fundamental contradiction that we face as a country, which is underdevelopment, impoverishment of our people, and lack of democracy? Does the Nationalist project, in the way that they put it, really address those fundamental contradictions? For me, I think there are other big issues that I would have loved to hear from you. The issues of how do you interface the Nationalist project and the region itself. Because the Nationalist project was not in isolation. There was a lot of intervention from outsiders for the liberation struggle, for example. How to interface it in the era of globalization, where your Chinese are coming and looting our diamonds. And more importantly, and lastly, the issue of corruption in itself as an entitlement. You can't run away from it. Yourself have been implicated. Whether it's true or it's allegations, but the fundamental, the central contradiction of the nationalist, the maneuvers, the practical politicians, as you put it, the practical practitioners, being involved in extractivism and corruption from the state, which is supposed to address the values that I've spoken of, the contradictions of poverty, of underdevelopment, and lack of democracy.
Thank you. I'll take two more. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm Richard Maumba, and my intervention is largely is going to come in and respond to a few issues raised by the Honorable Doctor.
Very brief, Maumba.
Oh yes, I'll be very brief. Okay, but my first point of contention is that the aspect of nationalism or the national project in itself is quite problematic. One, because it is underpinned in what is referred to as the coloniality of power. The very same coloniality of power that is entrapped in the paradigm of Eurocentricity. The very same perspective of Eurocentricity that depicts matters of human rights and even comes back to problematize matters of human rights in the post-colonial era, forgetting that at some point it denied the humanity of those that is now, advocating for their human rights. So I think that perspective of the coloniality of power is in itself problematic as we strive to unpack the discourse of the national project. So I think largely we should revisit the philosophical fundamentals, the epistemic fundamentals of that which you refer to as the nation or the national project.
Thank you, Maumba. Another one? Yes, sir. And then I'll take you, then with.
I'm Blessed Mhlanga. Professor Moyo, when defining what he called the Timla question, appeared to be talking really about the view that from outside we see ZANU-PF as egocentric, Chimichedu in ZANU-PF. If you're out of ZANU-PF, you can't fit. A report from the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission said that ZANU-PF was only feeding its own supporters. So you appear to talk about ZANU-PF and us co-sign it to a faction. If you are not you can't challenge President Mugabe because you have not been to war. We've seen generals in the election, before elections, the secure guard, in a press conference, saying that they will not salute anyone who didn't go to war. This is what has supported ZANU-PF over the years. Are you departing from the ZANU-PF system? Because you yourself have been on record at times saying that if you're not ZANU-PF, you are lost. So now you also haven't exposed yourself to the mantra of Chinichedu. And then the other issue is that you talk about Lacoste. Where is G40 in the mix of things? We want to hear what G40 is also doing, because Lacoste, people from Lacoste have said our war is against G40, it's not against Robert Mugabe. You have come out to say your war is against Lacoste, it's not against Robert Mugabe. So you converge on power because you love power and you fight outside.
Thank you. Speak the microphone.
Thank you, Professor. I'm your former student. I enjoyed this.
Who are you, former student?
Oh, Chris Mapuas. I have two questions. The first one is on you gave figures on 1.8 million people who are benefiting, who can end up being 9 million. I fear that we are taking somehow a parochial analysis if we reduce everything to political economy. And the second one is I would have loved to hear something about regional development. What is happening in SADC or within the region, the post-colonial state, which will affect the Nationalist project in Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Your last.
Thank you. My name is Ramkunya Murundira. I just want to respond to, I think, what Dr. Mandaza, the point you raised, which is important, that has the Nationalist project then died post-independence. And I think this has, to a large extent, been answered by Prof. Moyo. In that post-independence, you have had the Nationalist project actually trying to establish the structures of the framework for the economic democratization of the economy of Zimbabwe, participation, broad participation within the economy. And this is also in the constitution, as Prof highlighted. But what has then happened is that post-independence, the tools for then democratizing that economy are the youth. And I think the president, as early as 1986, did highlight this to say that the nationalist movement before independence was the youth driving the political agenda. Post-independence, it must be the same youth driving the economic agenda. But you then have these groups within the ruling party that are denying the youth that process of then democratizing the economy. And the reason they are denying those youth is that the youth are standing with the president because he believes in democratizing that economy. And I think if you listen to the youth since the Million Men March last year, they've been speaking to this democratizing of the economy. And I think you're going to see this becoming louder as they actually say we need to have the nationalist movement taken forward within the economic space, which they are being denied. Thank you.
Your last word on that subject for tonight, I mean.
Of course, there were no specific issues directed to me, but I think
I raised one. I raised the question.
What flows through most of the contributions here, I think, is to emphasize that the nationalist project is work in progress. It can't be anything else. We may have aspects of it recorded or given prominence in the Constitution, but it really has to be work in progress. If it's about structural change, which is all about democratization in political terms and in economic terms, and if it is work in progress, I think the case for a broad, inclusive approach becomes quite important. and try to go beyond making it, or reducing it to a partisan effort.
Thank you. Professor Moyo.
Well, thank you very much. I think that in discussions of this nature, especially on an issue such as the Nationalist project, it can't be, in the end, about right and wrong, or question and answer. It has to be a discussion. We have to bring on the table different views. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think you will have a good society that is in operation. Like, at the end, we are really examining what constitutes a good society. And the answer is not going to be, this is a good society. But from an African point of view, it has to be in relation to the ideals and values that make us African, that are the glue of our states. I keep hearing some people either being, in my view, unnecessarily defensive, that they think I said they are not nationalists or part of the Nationalist project. Or some people implying that I said the Nationalist project equals ZANU-PF. I didn't say that. For the avoidance of doubt. Because people want to say, we are narrowing it to a partisan position. No, I'm not. In fact, it would be very good for all of us if perhaps we resolve the national question and it's clear we have a common starting position, and we mutually assure each other that we are all nationalists and we subscribe to the Nationalist project. Then it will not really matter. The question of where is Vincent? The question of how is what political parties compete over. But I am very clear that the what is important in our context. The what has not been resolved. And you see it in the political manifestos of parties. But the how, you produce your own answer, how you are going to deal with these issues. But first and foremost, subscribe to these enduring values. We don't see the evidence. So I was raising a standard which, in my view, should be a point of reference for all of us, but which isn't. I don't want to start getting into party politics because that is for a different forum. But we will all sleep well if we thought we subscribe to these values, so let the one with the best program win. So no one will cut other people's throats the day after. They will attend to the business. But that's not what we have. And this business of saying Chinichedu mentality is ZANU-PF mentality. No, it's not. It's a factionalist mentality. ZANU-PF, take any of our manifestos. We subscribe to these nationalist objectives. Whether or not we meet them is an empirical question. and a relevant empirical question. But what I want to really say in conclusion, and in appreciating the discussion, especially the questions that have come up, is that I didn't come here to answer those questions. I didn't come up here as a prophet nationalist project. It's to put the issue on the table and say these are the issues, certainly in the context of the balance of forces. And the balance of forces are what they are. It's not me who has created them. And I can see, and I think this is unfortunate in a way, that Professor Sachpone doesn't want to engage the critique. And yet, as I said earlier, it's in front of him. So I thought by addressing it, I was freeing colleagues here so that they can engage on a matter that definitely is going to determine who is in government tomorrow. And if you have concerns about discussing that, then you might face issues that are uncomfortable tomorrow. I wasn't discussing the Nationalist project in Africa, a comparative analysis. I was discussing with Zimbabwe's Nationalist project. Over the weekend on Saturday, I was watching a television, and there was a dinner fundraising for Musha Nkadzi, and the guest of honor was the General Shonke from South Africa. So when he started making his remarks, he said they played golf and it looked like they lost. The generals lost the golf. So he says, General Chiwenga, if the winners of golf were to be determined by commands, we would have won. He said this on television. And no command golf. Of course, it reveals who might settle. I mean, if command economics is determined in terms of command, who would win? But the issue is, I think we need to be a bit free. Society needs to be free, needs to be courageous to discuss what is actually happening. And my evidence, even from this interaction, is that we have a long way to go. People still don't want to discuss. As far as I'm concerned, the issue is that there is a danger of us, and especially the ruling party, because it is the responsibility, moving away from the founding values. The founding values must be the framework. They must be what informs and drives our politics. But there is a danger that if in fact you think it stopped in 1980, there's no chance of us, or we are at risk of losing the opportunity of addressing these issues if we allow the current factionalist politics to determine not just public discourse, but state politics. There is a danger, because what's going on, this language of stockholders, of entitlement, is not ZANU-PF language. It's not true to say that this is ZANU-PF. I don't want to start saying, I know here among even media people who are part of this Team Lacoste. I said the so-called Team Lacoste. I did not say Team Lacoste. But if you push too much, we will end up having to identify so-and-so in the media, so-and-so in business, so-and-so in... I mean these people. But for purposes of discussion, I thought it was useful just to say the so-called. And the fact that I'm saying the so-called is I'm at least allowing some benefit of doubt. But I don't think I need to answer to each and every intervention, because I believe it's valuable, and in some cases even invaluable in its own right. because these things inform each other. Thank you very much.
I know we're running late, but I just want to say three things. First is to say that this has been a great event. It's meant to flaunt some of the scholarship that is in our society, and in bringing together with us some of the best minds in Zimbabwe, in the form of the two professors next to me. And the evidence is there, not only in this discussion, but also in the literary works which made them professors. Secondly is to thank Jonathan in particular, for being so frank about the whispers in our society. I've complained to the media houses here that I meet editors that I'm getting bored with the media in this country. Chidza, included. You keep just talking Lacoste, G40. It is your job as analysts, as scholars, to unpack these things. To tell us what do you think they're all about. What is their respective, if they exist as factions, respective ambitions. And more important, what informs their politics and their economics? What is it? Readership have a right to know, instead of just branding. Worse still, when you yourselves as media and scholars end up in those factions aimlessly. Aimlessly, yes. It shows in your writings, some of you. So I think you've been brave, you've put it on the table. And even if you are identified as one of the factions, I think it's now the responsibility of people here, ourselves included, to unpack it. Not as a fascination, in my view, but as truly a dangerous situation that this country faces. We are sitting on a time bomb. Do you want to see blood on the floor before you know we're in a crisis? And the crisis is really in the ruling party. We have seen violence already. We have seen threats of violence. Some of us were pilloried the other day for using the word silent coup or coup in the making. But that's the reality. It's taking place. And you look at it, let's critique it. Let's analyze it, at least. Lastly, it's just to say that we welcome any of you to the fourth Pan-African lecture. Let us know when you want to come. But in a fortnight, on the 14th, we have another of our finest minds in Zimbabwe, Professor Arthur Mtambara, launching his book here on the 14th. It's a Wednesday. He will give a talk as well. But be here and bring your manuscripts. Let's see more books. Tommy, thank you very much indeed. There are some refreshments as you go out. There are bigger refreshments further across the lawn. There are books to buy. Don't forget to get a copy of yourself, and I'm sure Jonathan has no objection in autographing your books as you wish. Most welcome. Thank you very much for your coming. Thank you. Excellent. Excellent. Good. Come on.